All right, tragedy. Aristotle wrote about this. He said that it evoked fear and pity in the audience. This was one of the first great works of literary criticism where he didn't just take an art like Athenian tragedy, which wasn't just it wasn't an art almost in the way that we think of it. It was in fact ritual. It was about community building, which I think popular art, even to this day, is about in some way. You know, everyone goes and sees, you know, Avengers Infinity War or something, and we all kind of talk about it around the water cooler, but so it does serve a communal function in that sense, and that's good. But obviously, you know, Attic tragedy was that on a much deeper level. It was spiritual. It was arguably a kind of religious event. And Aristotle wanted to understand it, and looking at these great works, he did think that they evoked fear and pity in the audience. Nietzsche had Nietzsche in effect agreed with him, but also was able to expand on this notion in a number of different levels. Nietzsche's first book was called The Birth of Tragedy. So he was a young professor who's supposed to be writing about Greek linguistics, but he instead wrote about Wagner and Schopenhauer and tragedy and the passing scene and so on. And it's a great work. I think most people, even if you haven't read Nietzsche, you probably have heard of the difference between Apollonian and Dionysian art. And Apollonian art is exemplified by sculpture, whereas Dionysian art is exemplified by music. And what Nietzsche meant by that was that Apollonian art is about creating a form from the void. It is about idealism in this way. He said that the art is a dream in the sense that the artist and the participant enters a world in which it all makes sense, in which it's all beautiful. One can think of the Quiros Boy, one of the first great, Western sculptures, or Michelangelo's David or something. This idealized thing that actually is real. An ideal is made real, and it inspires a vision of what that world could be. And it articulated ideas in the way that sculpture must. There is such a thing as abstract sculpture, but obviously sculpture in our tradition is representational. It's a way of articulating something in the world. There was a slab of stone, and it is turned into a man. This could be compared to Dionysian work, which is musical and emotional and abstract, but maybe abstract in a kind of different way than we use that. It's not rational. Even though music is rather rational and mathematical, the way that music makes us feel is emotional. And obviously this is Dionysian art, and Dionysus, as we know, was the god of wine, the god of drunkenness, and so on. And I think there is something to that. The way that great music can make you feel something in a way that you simply cannot articulate ever. One can't really articulate why there's this je ne sais quoi, an unexpressible quality to Mozart's G minor symphony that just simply, just simply makes your hair stand on end, and it reaches you and touches you in a way that can't really be expressed. One can analyze the music until the cows come home, but to express why it touches us is impossible. And I think there is another kind of Dionysian quality to that. I think I remember talking about this not too long ago, but whenever we go to a concert of some kind, whether it's high art like opera, symphony, or whether it's even just a rock concert, there is a sense that you're kind of, everyone's there kind of losing themselves together. When you're at a rock concert, people are singing along, you're in tandem, you move and dance in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. You would look like a madman if you were doing that, at the office or something. But here you're kind of allowed to do that. You lose sense of time. 2 hours passes like 20 minutes, and vice versa. And there's a sense of whether you're actually drunk or not, you are kind of drunk. You're part of this strange communal party that is singing together, and there is some kind of almost ritualistic aspect of it, that it's actually not too different from the Attic tragedy and hearing the cries of the chorus and so on. And so Nietzsche created this comparison between Dionysian and Apollonian art, and he also there's also a comparison to it between, you could say, Apollonian wisdom and then Dionysian wisdom. Apollonian wisdom is the wisdom of ideals. It's the wisdom of not mankind, but Superman. It is, Michelangelo's David is not your average Joe. He's a image of what no man could ultimately be, but every man strives for. And this could be contrasted to Dionysian art, which has its wisdom, but maybe a wisdom in another way. And that is that when one is participating in Greek tragedy, or one is and seeing the violence and the catastrophe on stage, and hearing the music and so on, and knowing the religious components of this, that one loses oneself. One kind of floats back into the void. When one's at a rock concert, and again, whether you've had something to drink or not, it kind of doesn't matter. You're there singing, feeling the rhythm, the beat. You almost lose all sense of articulation and idealism, and you kind of flow into the mass. You flow into the void and lose yourself. And that's why we do these things. That's why we love it. I think everyone kind of needs that at least once in a while. And the ultimate Dionysian wisdom is that all this articulation is but a dream and can't last and can never be fulfilled, and that the ultimate wisdom is that you are just simply part of nature, and life is suffering, and maybe it were better that you were not born. So Nietzsche, again, I think he took some of these ideas of fear and pity. He knew his Aristotle very well, and he developed them in this, philosophical but also deeply disturbing manner. I mean, the idea of seeing Oedipus on stage is it's not just about say, oh, he's flawed, or oh, this is such a terrible situation. It's to view the catastrophe of existence itself, is to view the tragedy of the existence itself as suffering, and as being a toy among gods who might even kill you for their own sadistic pleasure. So this is what tragedy is. That is tragic wisdom in this sense. So there is this interesting question of, in modern America, maybe the modern West, can we even have tragedy? What is the most common, resolution in a Hollywood picture? What is the common resolution? It's the happy ending. It's everything ultimately works out. I mentioned Avengers: Infinity War earlier. I have seen that movie. I actually thought it was pretty good, but that was part. It actually did end on this tragedy of half the universe dying. But we know that there's a part two, and though some people might die, we also know that there is going to be this resolution, and that all's well that ends well. That kind of image of half humanity evaporating into dust cannot stand, and that the just will be brought up, the unjust will be brought low, and the world will be resolved in a fair and maybe even poetically just manner. And you can see this again how does every or most every James Bond movie end? The bad guy has been defeated, perhaps defeated in humiliating fashion, and James Bond, despite his suffering, is making love to a beautiful woman. It does become a kind of boyish fantasy, but a happy ending. Certainly, Shakespeare wrote great tragedies. He also wrote great comedies, and they're almost all resolved at the end with everyone on stage. A bow is tied around everything. Every little conflict ultimately doesn't become a conflict. And it's one can ask about what this says about our cultures. I mean, what is it about the Greek world, the ancient world, that their most quintessential art form was tragic? That that their most quintessential art form told you that even great men can fall, that there is some catastrophe that becomes ineluctable and it's part of the world. And what is it about our culture that we can only see happy endings? Even my mention of James Bond and Infinity War are almost high art in comparison with most of the Hollywood fare, which has happy endings that are ultimately entirely shallow and meaningless and ultimately unsatisfying at some level. They want to tell us that life is good and that it keeps getting better and that it's all going to be okay, almost like someone reassuring a dying man at his bedside. It seems fake and wrong, and we know it's a lie. So what does it tell us about our own culture that we can ultimately only have happy endings? I think it says something about the fact that we live in a liberal culture, which does view that there's some invisible hand out there that is going to make everything right, that everyone can be a perfectly satisfied, happy individual in the end, that suffering will be overcome, and that it's all going to be okay, and that we aren't willing or able to even gaze at the tragedy of existence. We can't do it. There's actually a literary critic named George Steiner said, a real tragedy can't really be written in our time. I think also what Nietzsche tells us, what Sophocles tells us, what Attic tragedy tells us, what Heraclitus tells us, is that there are problems that cannot be solved. And there is a catastrophe at the heart of existence itself. And you can't get over it. And what Puccini was showing, even in his kind of compromised way, what Puccini and Verdi and so on were putting forth was that there are actually these problems at the heart of society that aren't just social, that they're actually existential, and you can't solve them, and you can only kind of approach them through art. And I do think there's something about, again, the liberal Christianity that we now have, or the Christian liberalism that we have, that we can't face that everything must have a solution to it. And so we can't gaze into the abyss. We're unwilling or unable as moderns